Okay, so yeah, action sequencing is related to multitasking, though they are different things. StarCraft being a real-time game consists of making a lot of actions, and in general, having more APM allowing you to make more actions helps you win the game better, because theoretically each action contributes towards winning the game.
Mm-hmm.
They do this in one of 4 ways that I've identified, which is either getting tempo for yourself or removing tempo from the opponents, generating value either by giving yourself things or destroying the opponent's things, allowing you to make better actions in the future, and this could be getting information to make smarter actions, or even just setting a control group to be more efficient with your actions later, or preventing the opponent from doing one of these 3 things. And that could be as simple as denying scouting information, or as advanced as forcing them to respond to you to prevent them from spending actions on things they want to spend actions on.
Am I supposed to be doing drills right now, or is that coming in a minute?
Yeah, 2 drills now.
Okay.
Just practice muscle memory of building pylons or something while
Got it. Okay.
not actually focusing on it. Because in the game, you shouldn't have to spend mental space on the building of pylons, right? That should be a pure mechanical thing while you're thinking about all the tactical stuff that's going on.
Got it.
Right, so action sequencing. So at any point in the game, you have a lot of different actions that you can perform. You have like a lot of macro tasks that you can perform. You have you can almost always be doing something more to get information in the game, scouting wise. Anytime you're interacting with the opponent, there's always some kind of micro you can be doing. Hjax is always telling you to have your army moving around the map doing something, or when you're having your oracles tagging army, which is something that you frequently forget to do. Like, there's always more actions you can be doing. You can't do it all, especially because you're not a pro. You don't have like 500 APM, and even they can't do it all. They always have something that they wish they could do, but they don't have the spare APM and attention for.
Right.
So you have to sequence your actions. You have to have priorities in which order you do the actions. So from the macro angle, right, we have a whole bunch of different macro actions. We can like build units, we can expand, we can build pylons, rat production, or transfer workers, or whatever. Most of these do not generate us value. The ones that generate value are building a probe, obviously, expanding, obviously. Building an assimilator will generate value because you mine more efficiently by mining from an assimilator than like oversaturating your minerals. Transferring workers to a fresh base is for the same reason of oversaturation. And the most indirect one would be building a pylon, because if you get supply blocks and can't build probes, then that will prevent you from generating more value. Building units doesn't actually give you value in the long run, though. If you have enough production to spend your money, then building units will give you a tempo boost in the short term, but it won't have any long-term effects unless you lack the production to spend your money.
Okay.
In a cannon rush scenario, and I've mentioned this before, a probe is infinite production in terms of minerals, at least. So for cannon rushing, as long as you're spending your gas, macro cycles are less relevant. Okay. Now, it is better to have your minerals in immortals than to have it in batteries, so it is still relevant, and it's always better to have it sooner so that you have the tempo from it. But it is less relevant than it may be in other situations. And even in a macro game, quite often, it's okay to miss macro cycles because you usually overbuild production when you're macroing. And so as long as you don't fight before you spend your money, not having the units now isn't actually going to hurt you if you aren't using them. And in fact, you can overbuild production to free up actions to spend elsewhere, because if you have more production than you technically need to spend your money, then that means that you can avoid losing value while skipping macro cycles for longer, and that means that you can devote more actions to other tasks. Ideally, of course, everyone will tell you to just macro better and whatnot. But I think there is a legitimate case to be made for deliberately overbuilding production and then having more APM available to harass or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
For our purposes of cannon rushing, you'll have the 2 robos, which is enough to spend your money. And if you get supply blocks, you're going to float a ton because supply blocks shut down your production for a very long time. And that is enough to make you unable to spend all of your money. And if you are just a little bit late on a macro cycle, that's not a big deal, but it will at the very least hurt your tempo.
Okay.
Then we look at micro actions. Also, I guess with the cannon rushing, we aren't building probes after a certain point. So before then, that's the most important thing, is building probes. That gets rare value.
Yeah.
That's like the only task that will generate value for us in the early game. We aren't expanding. At some point, we stop building probes. We get both our gas tools pretty early. We're not transferring to any fresh mineral lines. There are really no macro tasks that generate us value in the long term. So most of the value that we generate when cannon rushing is from micro. And this is either by killing something or keeping something alive. Okay. If you have the option between having an immortal dodge 8 biles and keeping it alive instead of having it go from full health to dead, or queuing up another immortal, obviously you want to save the current one, because your saving it generates you an entire immortal. You now have an entire more immortal than you have otherwise.
Right.
And queuing up an immortal will give you an immortal eventually, but it also takes the price of the immortal, and you don't get it for a while. So that's like a very clear situation where the micro gives you way more value for a single action than macroing would. There are also a lot of situations where it's not quite as clear, like stutter stepping forwards to secure an extra Ravager kill. That's really nice because you just generated a full Ravager's worth of value. So that's useful, even though it feels weird that perhaps stutter stepping forwards is generating value, but it does. Warp-ins, I would say, are the best way of generating tempo in a quick time. If you have warp gates, which we're skipping for right now, in PvZ at least. But warp-ins generate a lot of tempo immediately. Building immortals will generate a lot of tempo later, but not right now. Microing will effectively generate tempo immediately. Which means if the Zerg is all-inning you and you need to not die, right? Because the Zerg has amassed a lot of tempo and is trying to end the game now by attacking. What you need is to get as much immediate power as you can to avoid dying, and then the Zerg is presumably all-in, so you just need to not die. Right. Warp-ins then would be one of the most useful actions at that point for getting tempo, because that immediately gives you several units. And the next best would be micro, because that is something that happens right now and immediately will generate tempo for you, making your units more effective. Whereas queuing up an immortal is nice to do, or building a shield battery is nice to do, but that won't help you for like 20, 30, 40 seconds down the road.
Right.
That's good for the follow-up after the fight, but the immediate fight, the entire focus is not dying, so you want to be microing there. And that's one of those situations where I think it's entirely correct to just, like, it's okay to float a lot of money, because that's not the goal at the time. The goal is to make actions that will win you the game, and at this point, the game is won or lost based on whether you hold the fight.
Okay, that makes sense.
You do, of course, want to, at some point, queue up units that you have something to actually win the game with after the fight. But the primary goal is to not die.
Right, makes sense. So not doing the stuff for later, right? The queuing the immortals creates another sort of emergency situation just 20 seconds down the road.
Yeah.
But if you don't even make it there, then what was the point, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then most of PvZ is about generating value through interaction with the opponents. I've talked about this like 2 months ago, whenever we had our other session, which is with this build, you generate value by killing things with immortals and then not taking any actual damage on your own side. So every unit you kill is value that you have permanently generated because you aren't losing anything in the process. This means because, as I said, we aren't doing any macro tasks that generate value for us. After we build our first set of probes in our simulators, we're done generating value through macro tasks. So now all the value that we generate is through interaction with the opponent. And this means that you want to spend a lot of actions on that. You do, of course, still need to actually build the immortals, otherwise, you don't generate value if you don't have immortals, right?
Right.
And there's this mathematical principle called the Lanchester Square Law. I think that's what it's called, which states that in a fight, and it assumes perfect focus fire, and it assumes that every unit is in range at the same time. In a fight such as that, the casualty rates are proportional to the square of the ratio between the army sizes. There's a lot of long words there, so I'll repeat it in a different phrasing. If you have 20 units attacking 10 units, the ratio there is 2 to 1, right?
Yeah.
So square that is 4 to 1, and that will be the casualty ratio.
Okay.
So if you attack 10 Marines with 20 Marines, you're killing 10, you expect to lose 1/4 of that, so you expect to lose 2.5 Marines to win the fight.
Okay.
Which is massive. Like, that's a huge difference. So for that purpose, building more immortals is critical to generating value, because having 4 immortals will generate like the square of the value that you would generate with 2 immortals. Now, in this case, instead of our units dying, our units are simply being pulled back to our shield batteries or something. And shield batteries, of course, also make it weird because the units aren't actually dying; they like have infinite health and stuff.
Yeah.
But only the first unit has infinite health. After that, it's all different. So that makes it the math kind of weird. But the general principle holds, in that having more units is exponentially better for generating value. And also, of course, having more units will give you more tempo, make it harder for the Zerg to end the game by killing you. As Hjax has alluded to in chat, the way StarCraft can be won in one of 2 ways. You can either build up to a massive tempo spike and end the game. That's with an all-in or something. Or even like some kind of cheese, like a DT rush, I would call a massive tempo spike when your DTs come out and the opponent doesn't have detection. So some kind of cheesy unscouted thing, or just like a regular frontal all-in, I would consider both those just be a tempo spike. The other way is balancing the tempo to just barely not get yourself killed while generating as much value as you can, so that way you have more in the future. And if you do this better than the opponent, eventually you just have more, and then you win. And that's like the standard way of playing, right? Because in theory, if you can scout what your opponent is doing, you see them building up for that tempo spike, you can get a slightly smaller tempo spike at the same time while generating slightly more value. You hold their attack, you're ahead, and then you just keep building more value and keep expanding your lead until you win. That's the standard correct way of playing StarCraft. So it's very easy to screw up and lose to the tempo spike. With this cannon rushing style, we are using the latter, where we have the proxy outside the opponent's base, and we try to not die to any of their all-ins while we generate value with immortals. The Zerg can actually also play a similar style against us, where they try to not trade out badly against the immortals and have more drones because they have 2 bases, and then they try to generate more value than us by mining more and trying to not lose money. I don't think you've ever played against a Zerg trying to do that yet, but it does happen sometimes in GM. Or swarm hosts. Swarm hosts are great for generating value. Yeah, so in order to win with a style, you need to be interacting with the opponent as frequently as possible, because you need to be killing things. And so I would say if the Zerg isn't doing anything to you, the order of priorities, the priority order in general is produce units so you have units to fight with, and then fight. And then the third priority probably would be getting scouting information, because you do need to scout the tempo spike in order to not lose to it. But if you aren't generating value, you're going to lose regardless. So you need to interact with the opponent to generate value to have any chance of winning the game. And you need to scout the tempo spike that the Zerg is going for in order to be ready for it. But I would put that as a slightly lower priority. And you need to be reducing units in order to have any chance of surviving whatever the Zerg is doing, and in order to be able to generate value. And then whenever you're interacting with the Zerg, I would consider micro to mostly be the highest priority. Sometimes macro is more important. It depends on what micro options you have at the time. So For example, anything that will keep an immortal alive is highest priority because it's better to preserve an immortal than to build one.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that will secure a kill without causing you to lose something is usually high priority. And then things that just let you trade slightly better can be either higher or lower than that.
Okay.
And so what I want to do with you against, I guess, Ace Jack to Zerg, unless we have someone else, is I'm going to have you play PvZ, and I'm going to frequently pause, ask you what actions you are about to perform. On pause, you will perform the actions, and then I will pause again immediately. It may take us like an hour to get through a 6-minute game.
Right.
And that's why I said it's going to be very inconveniencing for the Zerg. And we might as well have the Zerg in the voice chat just here, so that way they know when I'm going to unpause.
Okay.
So I don't have to type like a countdown in chat. And yeah, so we'll see how this works out. For multitasking purposes, with Ace Jax's stuff, he's always talking about like you need to generate the actions that you need to generate actions to perform, right? And for this, you need to generate the actions and then prioritize them. Ace Jax's beeper training is about not tunnel visioning on one thing and switching tasks and stuff. This is going to be about generating the tasks and prioritizing them.
Okay.
What's interesting is that you can't actually just like sort it by value or tempo generated, because there's also action grouping. So if you consider like building a probe to have some kind of maybe diminishing returns or something, right? Maybe the second probe they build is like the first probe you build highest priority right now, and then after that would be like microing mortal, and the third priority would be building a probe. Obviously, you want to build both probes at once, though. Yeah. Because there's an overhead in shifting between tasks. So you can't just prioritize it. Sometimes it's better to do actions 3 through 6 because they're easy to do together rather than doing the two highest priority actions. But at the same time, you do have to switch between these tasks eventually because they will become very high priority. And so that's what Ace Jax is focusing on right now, is getting you to not tunnel vision and be able to actually switch tasks. It's painful to go through the overhead of it because it feels inefficient. But sometimes it is necessary because there are so much more efficient tasks that you can be performing. How's the mechanical muscle memory going?
It was harder than I thought to actually like put my brain into record mode and get every single word you said, which means that the clicking around is taking more of my brain than it ought to. But in a weird way, maybe that's an interesting form of training too, like to try to like give me a really important shiny dangly thing that my brain wants, right? But then also force it to be doing this stuff too. So it's like you're trying to think while under duress kind of thing. And yeah, exactly what HCheck says. I can rewatch the VOD. So I was trying to like, rather than feeling stressed out about that, I was trying to just like do it and sponge up as much of the information as I could, knowing that I'm gonna have to go back and re-listen.
Okay. And Ace Jax, do you have any thoughts on my theory lecture before we go into the game?
I guess we could put him in voice now, right? So
yeah, we might as well.
It. I forget how to do it though. I forget how to join a person into a call. So I just click on him and
I presume there's like a plus button somewhere, or
yeah, that sounds.
Plus in the top right. Add friends to DM.
Yep, got it.
Where is Ace Jax?
Got him.
Cool. Me too.
Now we're gonna have the amazing production problem of making sure that you guys have even audio levels with me and the game. And
oh yeah, that's always fun. Audio balancing is the worst part of streaming. That's part of the reason I don't listen to music while I stream.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey.
Infinite value generators. Is that just like the fact that are you just talking about like disruptors or something?
Any unit that can kill enemy units without putting itself at risk can generate infinite value.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
It is just like a slightly more extreme version of the trading with immortals. Ideally, the immortals won't be taking damage, like cold damage. So any value generated is free in the long term. With a disruptor, you can generate value easily by killing something, and then when it comes off cooldown, again, it's free. I don't think there's any kind of fundamental difference between the two, though.
Well, I think the more extreme example gets the point across a little clearer. That
Maybe.
this one disruptor, is going to get you 2,000 minerals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll do the same thing with Immortals. If Grimmy likes doing this, where at the end of the game he'll just look at the resources lost tab, and it'll be like 200 for him and 8,000 for the opponent because the Immortals aren't dying. Yeah, seeing something like that makes it pretty fair. But I guess I haven't actually. I should like take a screenshot of that for you, just show you what it looks like when it actually works according to plan.
And
Yeah.
that was actually the case with the Game 7 between Printf and Starkiller in the Testa thing, where Printf had 0 income, but he had a value generator, which was a few disruptors. Starkiller was mining on 2 bases for an extended period of time versus no income, and still lost because the disruptors were generating more value than Starkiller's 2 base income.
It really does kind of like it, I guess, throws mud in the face of like the traditional sort of theory of how RTS works, right? And the things that you need to be doing. Because what you just said, like it really goes against conventional wisdom, right? It shouldn't be possible. And that's kind of like what the casters were saying in that game. They're like, well, you know, I mean, Printf's trying, but he doesn't have an economy at all, whatever, like, and then you're just kind of watching it happen while they're saying that, right?
I think it's more expanding the theory rather than throwing mud in his face. Because it's expanding the theory to consider not just workers to generate value, but efficient engagements with the opponent generate value. And in this case, it's infinitely efficient because you're killing stuff and losing nothing.
Yeah. It's okay. So maybe a better way to put it is it's like when we sort of discover something new in physics, right? It doesn't like totally invalidate all of everything that we knew before. It's just like, well, all of that only happens in certain circumstances, and it's because of these underlying things, kind of thing.
Yes.
Here's another example of the value thing. Zealots are garbage at generating value because they usually die when they're fighting. So when you play the mass gateway style in PvT, I've told you that style is really disadvantaged if it base races. Because when you base race, both you and your opponent lose most of their economy. And it becomes about whose army can kill the other army, and in that sense generate the most value. But that style isn't looking to generate value, it's looking to punch your opponent in the face with a ton of tempo. And as soon as the economy is pulled out from underneath it, it actually is just garbage.
Printf's kitchen talk piece up. Typing intensifies.
Meanwhile, Blink Disruptor is incredibly good at generating value and is really strong in base races for that reason, because you can kill units without losing any.
Right, yeah.
So even if you're not mining, and maybe your opponent even is mining, you can still come out on top. In fact, did you end up watching the game between me and Pan?
No.
I don't think the bot exists anymore.
I have so much guilt about all the stuff that I'm supposed to do, and I don't, like, literally, okay, I'm on vacation through the new year. You know what I did last night? Instead of playing video games, I opened up Notepad++, and I wrote down how am I going to spend every single hour for the whole, like, including, like, okay, you're going to do this with your family, you're going to, okay, here's a day for you to spend with Adeline because you haven't seen her in forever, like... And I was talking to my dad about approachable StarCraft because I'm stuck right now. I haven't produced a video in like 3 weeks, so I'm really thankful that I have like a lot of them made from before.
Yeah.
And he's just giving me advice on like how to make it tractable to teach the next couple of things that I need to teach. I was telling him about my time management, and he's like, "Yeah, I just retired, so I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum." I derailed us a bit, but you were going to say something about the game against Pan?
Yeah, so I was playing the mass gateway style against Pan, and I just take a garbage fight and throw away my entire army, and he walks across the map and kills my... And I am feeling super duper dead. But I transition into disruptors on 2 bases while his huge army is sitting outside of my base. Meanwhile, I warp in zealots in every single one of his mineral lines. I remove his economy and then create an army that can trade more efficiently than his, and therefore, even though I'm not really mining, I can generate more value than he can. I end up winning the game just by like removing his ability to make a new army and having an army that basically mines for me by deleting his units. And he was sad.
Yeah, I don't think this is like a common way of looking at StarCraft strategy, but it's one I found very effective for my own purposes. I've never heard anyone else talking about it in this way, though. I'm not sure why that is.
I only started talking about it in this way after watching you win games with 0 income and 6 destruction.
Yeah, all right, are you ready to kick off?
Yeah. I enjoy finding like abstract theory about strategies and games, and Hjax can testify. I spend a lot of time just talking about very abstract theory when it comes to any kind of game. Even like G-Arena, I can talk for like hours about.
And confirm was Printf's roommate.
I'm going to be right back, and then we'll hop into this game.